Before you ask, no, this video is not going to be about Mary Sue's, although, we could probably make that one too. No, when I say good characters, I'm actually talking about the genuinely striking ones, the ones larger than life, who come to define entire genres, the ones who mirror your soul with the depth of their emotionality, the timeless archetypes that will stick in your mind forever. Don't misunderstand, I love these characters too, but they're also just characters. And after watching a few movies and shows directed by Taika Waititi, I'm beginning to think that this doesn't always have to be the case. That perhaps a story's character could be a little more by being a little less. Did you know we make more than YouTube videos? It's true. Like this video about the magic of crafting living beings, or this one about angels and why artists render them in the ways that they do. You can see them all over on Nebula by signing up for the CuriosityStream Nebula bundle deal for just $14.79 a year. That's less than $125 a month. Visit curiositystream.com/TaleFoundry and use code TaleFoundry. I'm really not much of a film buff myself. I prefer most of my stories to happen on paper. But, on occasion, I can be persuaded to watch the odd movie. And recently, after a long conversation about vampires, I was convinced by one of our humans to watch the movie What We Do in the Shadows, which was a very different take on vampires, a very different take on characters, period. I loved it. Because despite the fact that I was basically watching a mockumentary sitcom filled with creatures of the night, the characters all somehow felt more real than I'm used to, which I guess makes sense. The whole premise of this film is to peel back the layers of darkness and sensationalism around the concept of vampires and reveal the simple humans who lie beneath. And not in the Anne Rice Interview with the Vampire sense. These characters have depth, but the movie allows you to connect with the small things too. You might not know what it feels like to drink human blood, but I bet you've argued with your housemates about whose turn it is to do the dishes, or provided moral support to a friend after they made a questionable decision. It's a connection I think I usually miss out on here in the Foundry. Most of what I know about you comes from fiction, and I think fictional versions of humanity tend to omit some things. We don't tend to talk about what vampires do in their downtime between feedings, what pirates look like when they're feeling emotionally vulnerable, what Hitler might have looked like to 10-year-old kids. But Taika Waititi does. A lot of his works give us the opportunity to approach these characters on a very different, much less spectacular level. Titles like Our Flag Means Death, Jojo Rabbit, What We Do in the Shadows, even Thor Ragnarok, which is one of the rare Marvel movies I've actually seen. These stories all give us something simple within their characters to connect to, something I rarely see in fiction, something I think I'm just beginning to understand. As a writer myself, I sort of see this as a counterintuitive approach. When you decide you want to incorporate something really flashy like vampirism into one of your characters, you usually end up doing work to push that element into the foreground, elevate it or romanticize it by writing the rest of the character to support it. I don't necessarily mean making that their only meaningful trait, but building their life and their personality from that part of them, so that all their many interesting dimensions center around it. But that's not what Taika Waititi does at all. He takes all these really striking character concepts and trivializes them. They do influence the characters, but very often the vampirism, the piracy, the Nazi upbringing just end up feeling like costume work on an otherwise normal person. In most cases, I think that would be considered a bad thing. In fact, I've heard this criticism leveled against these films, calling the characters thin or pathetic. And I see where those critiques are coming from, especially when you take them for simple comedic beats. It can feel like these little random drag-on exchanges and bits of improv sort of undermine some of the gravity the story might have otherwise had. This isn't for every character or every story. Some characters should still feel like characters. Some moments should still be as romantic or as serious as possible. The argument that vampires should be darkly romantic, pirates should be ruthless, Nazis should be psychopathic. I mean, as much as I hate the word should for art, I can see why one might think that way. Characters in stories do have to be a little more compact. You can't just include everything. You do have to decide what you're going to spend your time on at some level, which means that a lot of those smaller aspects of life get cut away to focus on the really meaningful things. Each character has a role to fill or a purpose to serve in their story. We really don't need to see every bathroom trip they make. We don't need to be reminded that they're breathing. But in the act of trimming away all this fat, we also tend to lose a lot of the tiny, incidental things that make life, life. People are born, characters are written. As strong as your self-concept might be, whatever you feel your purpose is, your life will never be as manicured or intentional as a fictional character's. Your life is going to be full of small, circumstantial, chaotic, unplanned things. They'll shape you. And I think that's something a lot of fiction loses in the process of developing good characters. They may be carefully crafted to speak to the story of your life, to connect on a deep, emotional level, and that can be really profound. But they also often miss the simpler emotional level, the more common things, which fill up most of your life. By trivializing aspects of his characters that we would normally expect to be all-defining, Waititi's work actually allows life into his stories. Not the high-concept sort of life literary critics are talking about when they say things like life imitates art. I mean the life that you experience every day, the sort of life that happens between the epiphanies and the deep, heartfelt confessions. The goofy conversations you had with yourself as a child, the awkward flirting that you don't even realize counts as flirting, all your less flattering moments. Waititi's approach really flies in the face of a lot of the advice I've seen on character writing, where it's generally understood that you're supposed to trim out the fat, to combine characters and character traits, to simplify, to show restraint wherever possible. These characters, they're often allowed to break those paradigms. They do still serve a purpose in their stories, they can be deeply connective, but they're also just kind of living. He lets them have their small, circumstantial, chaotic, unplanned moments. In fact, making room for characters to improv is an important part of his approach to directing. Apparently, the cast of What We Do in the Shadows never even saw the script. It was just used for guidance, and they were allowed to just wing it. No character will ever be a fully fledged person, but with all of their little idiosyncrasies and unscripted moments, these characters do come dangerously close. And I think that's important. Part of the way that we consume fiction is by suspending our disbelief. You know it's all just made up, so you have to shut that skeptical part of your mind off to take it seriously. Instead of consuming media, you hope to have an experience, which is very hard to do when you're constantly thinking about the mechanics behind it. Characters can overcome that almost effortlessly. They are the connection, the portal into most fiction. They are your surrogate in the play, your avatar in the fantasy. You feel for them automatically because they're so much like you. And Taika Waititi's characters, although often absurd and farcical and quippy, are more like you than most. By behaving so much like ordinary people despite their interesting characterizing qualities, they help you to forget that they are, in fact, characters. They descend from their fabulous role as the portal, the avatar, the mirror of the soul, and just become somebody you know. It's special to me because I rarely get to have that experience. Sure, I have the Taleoids, and on occasion the humans who run this channel will come to check in on things, but without these stories, I think I would have missed out on the simple joy of just having someone else in the room with me. The ability to let your guard down, drop the act, forget the character, and just exist with the people around you. It's special, intimate in a way that the deep emotions of the heart could never be, because while powerful and story-worthy, those are only moments. But this is life. The everyday, the mundane, the majority of what you experience, and beneath the character, so much of what you really are. And I think more characters in stories could stand to embrace that. I'm not saying that every story should be a comedy, that all characters need to be as aggressively pleasant as Taika Waititi's, but I am saying that, perhaps, we trim a little too much sometimes. Perhaps it wouldn't hurt to allow our characters to be a little more vulnerable in these small ways. To let them have moments that aren't definitive for who they are, that don't advance the plot, that don't inform the audience about very much outside of how they live their lives. Whew. I did not expect to enjoy this topic so much. I'm honestly sad it's over. Unfortunately, it's going to be another whole week before our next Tale Foundry video comes out here on YouTube. Although, you could go watch it right now if you wanted to. It's actually already online, waiting to be watched ad-free over on our streaming platform, Nebula. Actually, we've got a whole bunch of stuff over there that won't ever be on YouTube. Full videos like this one about a fantasy world that basically has its own gigantic geographic genitalia, or this one about the morphology of angels and why artists are always giving them wings, even though they may not have really had them in the source material. You can find all of our videos there a week earlier than they upload on YouTube, plus all of these exclusive videos we only upload to Nebula. And we're not the only ones who have been posting there. The same is true for so many other amazing creators. YouTube is kind of a crazy place to make content. Don't get me wrong, I'm happy to have this platform, but you have to be so careful about your topic choices, your packaging, what you include in your videos. You just start to feel like you're walking on eggshells. Nebula doesn't have any of those concerns. All of the creators there are high quality and trustworthy, which means there are next to no restrictions, and that means we have a lot more freedom to do the things we really want to do. It's honestly so nice, because sometimes you just want to make the videos you want to make without worrying about all the other stuff. And here's the really fun part, you can get Nebula for cheaper than almost any other streaming platform on the internet. Like less than $1.25 per month. That cheap. We want you to have access to our Nebula content, so we teamed up with another streaming platform called CuriosityStream, who will give you a whole year of Nebula for free when you sign up with them. So, basically, 2 streaming services for less than $1.25 a month. And I cannot say enough about how much I love CuriosityStream as its own platform. Quality documentaries are hard to find, but quality documentaries about the things I care about, myths and monsters, literature, the madness of creative minds. Yes, this is where I want to be. CuriosityStream has documentaries about everything. I actually just finished this one about where creativity comes from called Unraveling the Creative Mind, which, as an artist myself, it's just really good to get a feel for how my own head sort of works. Definitely worth a watch. So, here's how to see next week's video right now, get access to all of our exclusive content, all of Nebula, and all of CuriosityStream for less than $1.25 per month. All you have to do is click the link in the description or go to curiositystream.com/TaleFoundry and sign up for 1 year using the code TaleFoundry. That's it. And that first year is only going to be $14.79, which, again, comes out to less than $1.25 per month. Frankly, I'm not quite sure how they can afford to do this for us, but I'm definitely not complaining. Seriously, take advantage of this offer while it's still going. I don't think there's any better one in the world of streaming. Well, this whole video was sort of a pleasant surprise, wasn't it? Sort of a departure from our usual, more literary content. It honestly makes me want to watch movies a lot more often. Maybe if you suggest one in the comments, I could give it a shot. Who knows? Perhaps we'll be making videos like this a bit more often in the future. Until then, thanks for watching, and keep making stuff up. I'll see you next time. Bye!